All right, let's jump right into this. If you're a compliance officer, a director, or really any kind of executive at a financial institution, you already know that safeguarding consumer data isn't just a best practice, it's literally the law. So today we're taking our source material and turning it into an action-oriented playbook. In this explainer, we're going to build a master checklist to help you construct what is essentially an impenetrable compliance fortress around the Fair Credit Reporting Act, FCRA, and the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, or GLBA. Let's get going because the stakes for messing this up are absolutely staggering.
Okay, hit the alarm bells because this number is where the reality of compliance gets extremely personal. Under the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, officers and directors can face personal liability of up to $10,000. And hold on, and that's not a flat fee, that is per violation. If your institution's compliance walls are breached, regulators can and absolutely will look directly at you and the rest of leadership.
And then it scales up incredibly fast for the organization itself. The financial institution can face civil penalties of up to $100,000 per violation under GLBA. When you stop and think about how a single data breach can expose thousands, or honestly even millions of consumers, you can see how fast these per-violation fines turn into business-ending territory.
Actually, scratch that. It gets worse. There is one final financial shock value we need to talk about. For banking and related financial institutions, failing to comply with GLBA can trigger penalties under FCRA. If regulators decide that your violations were knowing violations, the penalty can reach a massive $1.1 million. So, the takeaway here? Compliance isn't just checking a box for the regulators, it is your ultimate shield against catastrophic financial ruin.
To make sure you never see those kinds of fines, here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're covering the high stakes of compliance, how to secure and properly dispose of data, spotting red flags, a step-by-step for verifying vendor security, and finally, proactive strategies to stay ahead of the curve.
Part 1. The high stakes of compliance. Building the foundation.
You have to understand that there is a massive regulatory web just waiting to strike if you drop the ball on consumer data. It's not just one single agency. The CFPB has broad rulemaking and enforcement authority over things like FCRA and GLBA, but they share the field with the FTC, who actively enforces privacy and safeguard rules. And oh yeah, don't forget the state attorneys general, they have concurrent enforcement powers. You could literally find yourself fighting a multi-front war at both the federal and state levels at the exact same time.
Moving to Part 2, secure and dispose of data, fortifying the walls.
So, the GLBA Safeguards Rule demands a really strict balancing act. On one side, you've got administrative security. This is the human element, right? Things like training your workforce and keeping a close eye on vendors. But that absolutely has to be paired with hard technical and physical security. We're talking access controls, heavy encryption across your networks, locking down physical buildings, and solid disaster recovery plans. Think of it like this. Your fortress is only as strong as its weakest guard and its weakest gate. You have to fortify both.
Now, eventually, all data reaches the end of its life. Enter the FACTA disposal rule. This applies to anybody using consumer report information, from a massive corporate lender down to a local used car dealer. The core standard here is you must ensure reasonable practices to protect that data when you get rid of it. You can't just chuck sensitive files into the dumpster out back. You have to weigh the sensitivity of the data, the costs, and the available technology to figure out what's actually reasonable.
Luckily, the source material completely removes the guesswork for us with a very specific physical checklist of acceptable disposal methods. Got paper? You need to burn it, pulverize it, or shred it so it can never be reconstructed. Electronic media? Completely destroy it or wipe it entirely. And if you're outsourcing this whole process, you must do your due diligence and hire a certified document destruction contractor. I highly recommend adding these exact methods to your own checklist right now.
All right, Part 3, spotting the red flags, manning the watchtowers.
Under FACTA, certain financial entities have to develop a written identity theft detection program. This is your early warning system, your watchtowers. So what actually is a red flag? Well, the FTC and CFPB define it as relevant patterns, practices, and specific forms of activity that signal possible identity theft. There's no magical one-size-fits-all list here. It actually demands that you build a custom radar tailored directly to your specific business risks.
Even though you're building a custom program, the FTC does give us a few specific examples you must actively monitor. Your red flag radar needs to catch alerts or warnings from consumer reporting agencies. It needs to flag suspicious ID documents. It has to trigger on weird personal identifying data, like an address that totally contradicts the credit report.
And it must monitor for unusual use of a covered account. If your program isn't actively hunting for these specific things, your watchtowers are totally blind.
Part 4. Verifying vendor security. Guarding the gates.
To build a real safeguards program, you have to address the massive vulnerability of third-party vendors. The GLBA Safeguards Rule gives us an exact step-by-step audit plan. Step 1, designate a specific employee to own the safeguards. Step 2, do a written risk assessment. Step 3, design and implement the actual program. Step 4, and this is a big one, select appropriate service providers and strictly bind them to security standards in your contracts. And Step 5, evaluate and adjust. Because remember, if your vendor gets breached, regulators are coming straight to you.
Part 5. Proactive strategies. Your action plan.
Look, it's time to shift from just reacting to rules to building a proactive, holistic defense. This quote right from the Safeguards Rule source material basically says it all. Evaluate and adjust the program in light of relevant circumstances. Compliance is definitely not a set-it-and-forget-it thing. It's a living strategy. If you launch a new mobile app, your risk profile changes. If a new cyber threat pops up, your testing results change. Your program has to constantly adapt or it just becomes obsolete overnight.
And man, nowhere is that more true than in modern digital banking. Nearly 70% of Americans use online or mobile banking right now. That requires highly specific, proactive technical strategies. You've got to update those red flag lists regularly to keep up with new cyber fraud. You have a duty to educate your consumers. You must use robust firewalls and anti-malware, enforce strong passwords and end-to-end encryption. And crucially, you have to constantly audit your online and mobile software for new vulnerabilities. Which leaves us with one final, absolutely critical question. Take a hard look at your institution right now. Is your compliance program just a paper shield? You know, a binder sitting on a desk that's going to crumble the second a cybercriminal or the CFPB tests it? Or is it a proactive fortress, actively scanning for red flags, auditing vendors, and adapting to new threats? Take this master checklist we build, analyze your defenses, and fortify your institution today. Because as we saw right out of the gate, the cost of a breach is simply way too high to ignore.